G'day guys, and welcome back to your English Aussie. Merry Christmas, and I hope you guys have a great Christmas and New Year's. Today we will be talking about some of the key news coming out of FPL, the SAKA injury, who the best replacements are for SAKA, all the tactical observations from game week 17, and what to look out for game week 18. As well as going through the usual statistical player picks and tactical observations on players. Let's get straight into it with a review of the Aston Villa versus Man City game this week. What a game it was, 2-1 to Aston Villa. We keep thinking that Man City are going to somehow click into gear and become the team we know they're capable of, that Pep's going to be able to make these tactical switches and things are going to be working out for them. But once again this week they were exposed by Aston Villa and exposed by that man Morgan Rogers. We discussed this last week, how we thought for Rogers specifically against Man City that this was a good fixture. We thought that he would be great in transition where Man City had been struggling. And that's sort of where we saw the upside for that game from Villa, but little did we know how big that upside was and how important Man City's lack of ability in that transition defence was to the game. And Villa were fantastic, really. They played in sort of a 4-6-0 defensive shape. Which basically was ultimately they had four at the back and then sort of this very narrow box of six that was their two defensive midfielders, then their two sort of wider players, so you would say, that played very narrow, the sort of right and like McGinn and the left midfield, and then Rogers and Tielemans, and it was sort of Rogers and McGinn either side. And then Tielemans and Duran pressing at top, all super narrow. And the way Man City set up with Lewis sort of inverting into that defensive midfield role in the first half, and then Gundogan, Kovacic with Kovacic, and then Gundogan and Foden sort of playing in that attacking midfield role. They were super narrow with really only Grealish pulling out very wide. Out on the left, and then Bernardo Silva on the right, who Villa sort of ignored a little bit out there, which was really interesting to see. I thought really that the main threat for City in that first half was Grealish out on the left-hand side up against Matty Cash, who really they just needed to give him the ball more and more, because he was the guy that was creating the chances for them. And in that sort of narrow midfield box that Villa played, like City were really finding it difficult to get anything through the middle there, but they just kept trying to go through there. I thought it was interesting defensively for City, the issues that we've been seeing. What sort of happened in this game is they started with like four at the back with Lewis on the right, Guardiola on the left, and Akanji and Stones in the middle. Lewis would invert into the defensive midfield role when City had the ball, leaving three at the back for City. Guardiola didn't really seem to know whether he should be tucking into that centre-back role or if he should be sort of attacking out on that left wing, like the left side, where he's been so sort of aggressive and made so many good plays for Man City this season and in previous seasons, and that sort of left them with a spot of sort of John Stones being the centre back, Guardiola sort of in between centre back and left back, and Akanji spreading super wide out to the right hand side because Rico Lewis had inverted into the defensive midfield role. And with Lewis and Kovacic in that defensive midfield, they actually sort of continued to press up on Villa, and when Villa were able to break through that press, there was just no one there for Man City, because Akanji had pulled out very wide and sort of almost playing like a split role, but because of Lewis's inversion, they just had no one. They just had no one defensively. It was just sort of Morgan Rogers, Tielemans, Duran v John Stones, and a sort of half centre back Guardiola, half left back Guardiola, and they just had huge gaps in the middle. And Villa just continued to exploit that. Pep tried to change it up a little bit at half time, going to that 3-2-4-1. Walker in the back three when Stones came off. But again, they just kept getting caught. Their defensive midfielders were pressing a little bit too high. Their back line just kept getting exposed continuously by Villa's aggressive counter-attack. And I think that's something that teams are going to start to keep employing against Man City in the future. You can see they're vulnerable on the counter, and their offensive creativity and clinicality and sort of incisiveness has just not quite been there as it has done previously. Phil Foden did get his goal late on and did have a couple of nice moments. The service to Haaland wasn't really there, and obviously, as we've talked about and as you've heard Roy Keane slate him for, his involvement in the build-up play is not really there. But I don't think that's what he's there for, to be honest. He's there to be supplied with chances, and he will finish them. And yeah, on the other side, I just guess Rodgers great in transition. I think Villa look a lot better with Boubacar Kamara back. We did that deep dive on Villa earlier in the season and talked about how they needed to retain possession a little bit better with Kamara in that sort of double pivot role. I think they've looked far better defensively, and yeah, just very dangerous on the counter. John Duran obviously getting the starting spot over Watkins. He could really be an option for FPL going forwards. Scoring again, looks like he's going to maintain that spot. The only thing again is just minutes risk, and if you're willing to risk that sort of minutes with Watkins likely to be coming off the bench frequently. Moving on to the Tottenham versus Liverpool game. What an unbelievable game this one was as well. 6-3 to Liverpool. And just amusing because we talked about this as well and we said it was likely that Spurs were going to come out to play and play an offensive style, fullbacks pressing, wingers high, and that was going to really suit Liverpool. And that's exactly what happened, to be honest. And I thought the one really interesting thing to take away from this game was Trent and Robertson, but I think we've obviously been talking a lot about Trent recently. Trent was playing in his old fullback role under basically that he played under Klopp this week, and I thought it was an interesting tactical change-up from Slot of what he did to exploit the fact that Spurs obviously pushed on their fullbacks, that they had sort of Son on that left-hand side pressing up high against Liverpool and actually like not getting back as much and trying to sort of really get at the Liverpool fullbacks. And Liverpool just went, yeah, all right, if you're going to do that, actually we're going to score more goals than you. Played Trent Alexander-Arnold way higher than he's been playing all season. A completely different role he played in this game. And actually that contributed to him getting the assist. He was a lot higher, delivered that fantastic ball that obviously Trent has the quality to do into the box, and got his assist that those of you that have gone for Trent were hoping for. I thought it was a great tactical adjustment from Slot, and just to show that he's capable of making those adjustments based off the opposition and who they're playing against. And yeah, obviously very fortunate for Trent owners. I don't expect that to last in future games. I do think that this was a style that they adapted specifically for Spurs and the way they play. And I do think that Slot would like to be more defensively solid in future games, and he will definitely look at that, having Liverpool conceded 3 goals. And I think a lot of that was due to their fullbacks being super high and leaving them exposed, and the midfield sort of not being able to cover in those gaps during those moments. But yeah, Liverpool just showed so much attacking talent that it was just too much for Spurs, to be honest. Another point just to talk on is Jota was not quite fit enough to start the game. Diaz played in that number 9 role again, looked excellent in that number 9 role. I would say I don't really expect Jota to start again in the midweek game for Liverpool against Leicester. It looks like he's just not quite fit enough to start and play that sort of 60-70 minutes, and he'll probably come off the bench, and I think his minutes will be a little bit managed over this Christmas period with the games coming up quick and fast. For Spurs, Maddison again. I think Spurs again, they lined up with their most attacking lineup, right? They played Cooley on the right, they played Son on the left, and Maddison in the 10. That is their most creative lineup. However, I do say with a game where Liverpool are going to take it to them, that is sort of a game where Brennan Johnson on the counter-attack could actually be useful to be in there. But it was nice to see that they set up with that sort of formation that we like for Spurs. Maddison in that number 10 role, obviously getting another goal, is definitely an option that we will come on to look at for Bukayo Saka this week. Spurs not with the greatest fixtures coming up, but Maddison in that role, and perhaps even Kulusevski in that right wing role, do look really interesting options for replacements for Saka. I think if we move on to the next lot of games, West Ham v Brighton, it was a 1-1 draw. Brighton set up in a 4-3-3 this week with Ruta on the right, Mitoma on the left, and João Pedro starting in that number in that forward role. Which again, we don't think is really his best position for Brighton. I think he's nicer in that number 9 role behind the striker. And I think Hertzler saw that at half time and tried to make the changes. He put Ruta up front. He dropped JP back into that number 9 role. But I just think the Brighton attacking patterns are just not the same without Welbeck. Like, Welbeck just had that fantastic ability to link the play between the front four, to be able to also run in behind and cause threat. And he's actually a much bigger miss than we anticipated for Brighton. And they haven't quite been able to replicate that with Ruta and JP so far. West Ham, on the other hand, again just lacked that cutting edge. Fulkrug started up front for them with Bowen out on the right hand side, which I thought was the best position for Jarrod Bowen and where he is at his most effective. I still do think that is the case, despite him getting his assist in that striker role. It just feels like he's not as used to playing that role. A lot of it is really trying to work on the counter and get in behind with his pace, whereas in that right wing role it's a little bit more creativity, build up play, etc. But West Ham just really haven't shown a lot of creativity, haven't shown a lot of incisive passingness, and really just look slow in both senses, a bit attacking and going forwards, as well as really defensively in transition, as we've talked about all season. I think Bowen's obviously their main guy, along with Kudus, and hopefully he can do something against this Southampton team next week that are running under a new manager who we'll talk about soon. Palace v Arsenal. Honestly, I would say we can almost write this one off for Crystal Palace. They changed formation without Eze to a 5-4-1 and put Sarr out on the wing, whereas he's been playing in that sort of 2-1 up front behind Mateta. It's been Sarr and Eze in the 10 role with Mateta up front, and they've been linking up so nicely in that sort of front three. Whereas in this game with Eze out, they sort of moved Sarr out to the wing and set up a little differently, a little bit more. I think was intended to be a more defensive structure, with the sort of 5 at the back to counter Arsenal and their attacking threat. Obviously, this didn't work out very well for Palace, losing 5-1. Unfortunately, Saka came off after 20 minutes. It was confirmed by Arteta that he's going to be out for many weeks, and he has torn his hamstring. So generally with hamstring tears, they can either be grade 1, grade 2 or grade 3. If it is a grade 3 tear, that is generally quite serious, and they do require surgery on the hamstring. That could be a much longer injury. I don't think it is a grade 3 tear. If he's out for many weeks, the most likely thing is it is a grade 2 tear, and that could be anywhere between sort of 2 to 6 weeks, really, for a grade 2 tear of the hamstring, depending on how quick the recovery time is. Martinelli got brought got switched to the sort of right hand side with Trossard on the left. And Arsenal did continue to thrive without Saka on. Gabby Jesus, again with 2 goals and an assist, following on from his hat-trick in midweek. Definitely someone that, with Arsenal playing Ipswich next week, that you have to look at as a potential option. Another option, again, Martin Odegaard will now probably most likely be on all penalties. He'll probably take corners from Saka's side as well, so giving him a couple more strings to his bow. But whether he will sort of get into those attacking positions and get the output that you want from a Saka replacement, we will obviously have to wait and see. Everton, Chelsea. Look, I thought Everton were super aided by the conditions on the day. It was a super blustery, windy day. And obviously Everton, as we talked about, play that very direct long ball style. That was actually quite difficult to deal with for the Chelsea defenders. The ball was obviously blowing around in the breeze and sort of allowed Everton to get up the pitch. Chelsea weren't able to sort of clear and come straight back at them as we expected. However, they did have plenty of opportunities and did sort of create chances against Everton that, Pickford made some really fantastic saves, a couple of chances that Nicholas Jackson perhaps should have done better with. But we've seen that Everton have been defensively very resilient over the last few game weeks, and again, do not look like a team that you should be targeting at the moment from an offensive standpoint, despite the fact that if you do have defenders up against them, it looks like an easy day for the clean sheet. I'm going to say this now, and that's going to come back to bite me next week with Man City v Everton and the 2 Man City defenders that I currently have in my team. Cole Palmer blanking again. Any of you that went for Cole Palmer as captain will be devastating, with Isak and Salah really smashing it this week. Wolves Leicester, 3-0 to Wolves. Van Nistelrooy again has Leicester very open defensively and looking to be an attacking team who want to get wins on the board almost to be able to stay up. Cunha scored again. No news on a ban for Cunha. It is honestly possible that he could be available for both games over this Christmas New Year's period. I was talking about Bentancur for Tottenham and how sort of his number of games banned didn't become official for sort of like 3 weeks after the appeal. I'm not sure if Wolves have actually appealed at this stage or not, but it seems like they probably have, considering there's nothing that we've heard on the ban coming through. I think Leicester definitely look like a team to target from a defensive standpoint. They've not quite got it together yet under Ruud, and with Liverpool up next week, this could be a game to target for Liverpool attackers and the man himself, Mo Salah, in the most unbelievable form at the moment. Obviously 2 goals, 2 assists again this week. Manchester United versus Bournemouth. Now, I've obviously got the wrong commentary on the screen here for this game, but the Manchester United team just weren't quite at the runnings. The game could have been a little bit different if United had managed to score a couple of the chances that they did have, but again, as we've talked about, they've had a lot of defensive issues and they haven't quite worked out how to play defensively yet under Amorim. They are leaving some gaps in between the different lines of defence, midfield and the front line, and Bournemouth sort of did exploit them a little bit on the counter. Also, again, struggling to defend set pieces. So there are still some important issues that Man United need to resolve defensively. From an offensive standpoint, they did start with Bruno Fernandes and Ahmad alongside Xerxes in that sort of front three role. I do actually like Xerxes at the top. I think he links the play very well. I think from a scoring perspective, I see him more as like a Firmino role, where he's really nice at linking the play. But then those other two players for United really need to be sort of deadly attacking threats, which Bruno and Ahmad which weren't able to be this week. They did miss a few chances, Ahmad and Bruno both having them. And then Garnacho coming on late and also missing a really nice chance for United. So United did have their opportunities, but do look like a team that are struggling at the moment from both an offensive and defensive standpoint. But at least they are creating those chances offensively, which I think prior to Amorim coming in, they were struggling to show that they could do. Brentford v Nottingham Forest, really interesting game to be honest. Brentford went back to that 4-2-3-1 formation with Mbeumo playing out on the right wing after being centrally in sort of a 3-5-2 over the previous weeks with Wissa up top. I did think that actually didn't hamper him as much as it has done in previous weeks. He was actually very creative from out there on the right wing, and it felt like Brentford made an effort to get him the ball and for him to stay involved in the play whilst out there, where he had been a little bit isolated out on those wings in previous weeks for Brentford. And he did create some chances. They just weren't able to get the ball into the net. Some nice saves from Sells and some fantastic defending, especially from Murillo, who, from my perspective, was man of the match in that game. His defensive physicality that he had against Brentford, he really dominated their centre forwards in Wissa from a physical standpoint, intercepted a lot of the balls in there, and then his distribution from centre back out to the wide areas for Nottingham Forest to start their sort of quick counter attacks was just brilliant. And that was how a lot of the Forest attacks began, with sort of those cross-field balls from Murillo into the sort of winger roles, and being able for sort of like Morgan Gibbs-White, Elangas, etc. to be able to break on Brentford and have those swift counter-attacks. Nuno sort of adapted as well this week. He's played a 3-4-3 formation for Forest, which allowed sort of Nico Williams, who's been replacing Alex Moreno in the last couple of weeks, and Ola Aina to get into sort of a much higher wing-back position role, almost as wingers at times, which was sort of what Forest were looking to do, really exploit the wings of Brentford, where obviously they have had some injuries as well, and that really worked out well for them, with Aina managing to get one of the goals, and I thought Nico Williams also had a fantastic game offensively. So yeah, I think really interesting from Nuno, shows his adaptability as well. Probably not something Thomas Frank expected, who I think is also tactically a very good coach with his switch-ups. And yeah, well-deserved 2-0 win for Nottingham Forest, who's sitting still at 4th in the table, which is really just fantastic from them. And then I think if we move on to probably one of the things that all of you are excited to see, and that is our statistical analysis and who will replace Bukayo Saka. And guys, just a quick shout out. If you have been enjoying this content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video. We're just a small channel trying to grow at the moment, and I really appreciate all of you guys that watch these videos, and would really appreciate if you could give us a subscribe and a like to be able to help me keep producing this great content for you guys going forwards. Anyway, let's crack straight back to it. Defensively, the defensive analysis we've sort of been talking about for the last few weeks. And the first guy that I've got on this list is Gabriel. I think that's, with Timber's picture, always good. Keep me on my toes, keeping you guys on your toes, making sure you can spot these things. And I think it leads me into what I was going to talk about anyways. I think that the two key premium defenders are really sort of that Gabriel and Timber for Arsenal still at the moment. Ipswich next up. could be a really nice defensive option for Arsenal. And I do think now with Saka being out, they are going to have to rely on being a little bit more defensively solid. And I think the games after that with Brentford, Brighton and Tottenham are not the easiest games from a defensive perspective. So after this Ipswich game, these sort of Gabriels and Timbers are people that maybe you want to look to move to potentially Liverpool defence. I will say, as I put this man up on screen, potentially Man City defence. I know that is something that might sound strange to hear, but it's more of a fixtures based thing rather than looking at how Man City have been performing over the previous weeks. And I think all of us have thought at times that Man City would be able to turn it around. And I think now's the time to think, well, actually, maybe they're not going to be able to turn it around. However, I'm still looking at that from a fixture perspective and thinking, even if these were teams at the bottom of the table who are not playing particularly well, I would potentially be looking at some of their defenders over this sort of fixture run. Perhaps a Fulham or a Brighton, etc., that have sort of cheaper price defenders. Would I be looking at them if they had potential for attacking returns? The answer is probably yes. And for me, there's still that sort of a little inkling at the back of the mind about, City are a good team. But obviously, we've seen that they're defensively have not been fantastic so far this season. So for me, Guardiola is an option due to his attacking potential and due to the fixtures for Man City. But I think if you don't trust in that Man City defence and you don't like that, I totally understand not moving for a Man City defender. And I think it's definitely a mindset of, do you think Man City will perform over these next 5 game weeks, which obviously are fantastic for them with Everton, Leicester and West Ham in the next 3. Next couple of guys from a defensive standpoint before we get onto the midfielders are Anthony Robinson of Fulham, obviously keeping a clean sheet this week. Big potential for attacking returns up on that left-hand side. He's been linking up really nicely with Alex Iwobi over the last couple of weeks and really been in excellent form for Fulham. Fulham do have, after this week against Chelsea, a really nice fixture run coming up. Bournemouth, Ipswich, West Ham, 19, 20 and 21. And that fixture run continues for a while for Fulham. Robinson obviously with 6 assists so far this season, the most for a defender in the Premier League. And Lewis Hall for Newcastle. Newcastle have really started to click into gear lately. Again, Lewis Hall been linking up really nicely with Anthony Gordon on that left-hand side. Almost got an assist this week. Just missing out with Bruno Guimaraes heading onto the post from a Lewis Hall cross. And obviously with Newcastle starting to play well, with reasonable fixtures coming up over the next few weeks. I think Villa, Man United, not too bad. Tottenham obviously attackingly are good, and then Wolves are fixtures where they could pick up a clean sheet over that run, 1 or 2, with some potential for some attacking returns for Hull. Some other guys just to talk about in this list. Obviously, we've talked about Trent and how we don't see him as the best value for money at that probably going to be 7.1 million overnight. Because of the reduced role he has been playing. I know he played in a more attacking role against Spurs, but we do expect that to just be for this singular game week as a tactical switch. Also, the fact that McAllister is starting to take some of the corners off him, which will reduce his expected assists going forwards slightly. Funds hopefully can be better spread in midfield and attack, as we've discussed. Matt Doherty at Wolves has been starting to play in that wing-back role for Wolves over the last few weeks, in sort of that very attacking role. I expect him to continue in that position with Aït-Nouri on the other wing when he comes back, and Semedo starting to play in that back 3 of a 3-4-3. Whether Wolves can sort it out defensively, I'm not sure under the new manager Vitor Pereira, but possibly in the future, maybe to just keep an eye on Matt Doherty. Might be someone that will go on the watch list in my future videos for when Wolves' fixtures turn good again in the future. Daniel Munoz of Crystal Palace plays on sort of the right wing back role for Palace. Often can be inverted into the 10 or pushed on as a winger when Palace are down. Very interesting option for me. Palace have really nice fixtures coming up over the next few game weeks and have been starting to perform much better. If we write off that Arsenal game, they haven't lost in their previous 5 Premier League games and had only lost 1 of their last 8 before that. So yeah, Daniel Munoz definitely an option for me going forwards for Crystal Palace. He is at, I think, 4.7 mil as well, so definitely a nice option in that sort of cheap price point area. Rene Nouri for me, still a red flag. He is 1 suspension away from another ban. I know that's going to sort of reset soon, but again, with the Wolves fixtures, just not for me. I'd probably look at Matt Doherty over him for the time being. Couple of other options. Malo Gusta at Chelsea. With Chelsea having some defensive injuries, looks like he might play over the next few game weeks for Chelsea consistently. He's obviously somebody who inverts into that sort of number 10 role for Chelsea and gets forward into those attacking positions. And with Chelsea's good fixtures, could be someone to look at. Outside of that, Milenkovic of Nottingham Forest, along with really an Ola Aina. Looks very nice with Nottingham Forest's fixtures starting to pick up from game week 19 onwards. Definitely somebody to keep an eye out from a defensive perspective. Now, I'm sure what you've all been waiting for is the midfielder analysis, and we will talk through in detail about what our potential Bukayo Saka replacements are going to be. Obviously, the main 2 guys are still the main 2 guys if you are looking to buy a midfielder in Mo Salah and Cole Palmer. If you don't have them by now, please buy at least Mo Salah. Needs to definitely come into your side. Cole Palmer is an interesting one, and we will touch on him in a minute, of whether you are looking to go into Erling Haaland for this 5 game week period and whether you could potentially sell Cole Palmer. Outside of that, we have some thoughts, we have some players, and at the lower price point, we have Ismail Assar as a potential replacement for Bukayo Saka, who has been confirmed out for a few weeks with a torn hamstring and will be missing at least the next 3, potentially 4 or 5 game weeks for Arsenal. Ismail Assar has been in great form for Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have some fantastic fixtures coming up, and Sarr, even moving out onto the wing role, was able to score again, 2nd week in a row for Palace. He has been looking really nice in that sort of dual number 10 role, with Eze available, playing just in behind Mateta, making runs past Mateta as Mateta drops in, as well as sort of playing those passes through to a running Mateta. He's previously scored plenty of points in the past in the Premier League, proven player. Used to actually be a great FPL asset when he was at Watford back in the day. And yet we just have some very nice stats here at 0.6 expected goals and assists, and 0.31 expected goals, up there with sort of the best of the lot, really, for any price point other than the Salah, Palmer, De Bruyne and Son, and sort of anyone that's below that 10 mil almost, or 9.5, 10 mil. Yeah, he's really up there in terms of expected goals and assists. Very interesting. Palace have started to pick up lately, so I do think at that price point definitely could be worth a transfer in. Another option I think definitely being slept on, and actually one of the guys that I would say I prefer as an option, is Jacob Murphy of Newcastle. 0.55 expected goals and assists and 0.2 expected goals. And when we go on to the next slide, You'll see he's very close to, well, you can see it here, he's very close to another man that people are touting at the moment, of Phil Foden of Manchester City, who's 0.22 expected goals and 0.53 for expected goals and assists. Jacob Murphy's been a real driving force for Newcastle in that midfield, on the opposite wing to Anthony Gordon, getting into the box, getting into those positions, always looking to shoot. And if I'm being honest, I would say at that price point is a better option for me than an Anthony Gordon. I definitely would prefer him over Gordon. And at 4.9 million, he just could be somebody that's so valuable to have in your team going forwards. And I think if you do go for a second Newcastle player on top of Isak, and maybe even a third if you have a haul, I would choose Murphy over Anthony Gordon at this stage. I don't think his minutes are bad. He's been starting for Newcastle. He's obviously started 10 of the 14 games he has played. He has sort of, over the last couple of games, grabbed a few goals and sort of bedded down that starting spot over Harvey Barnes. And I guess that is the only problem with Jacob Murphy, is will he continue to keep that place going forwards? I do think so. I think he will continue to start. I don't think he'll have 90 minutes every game, but I do think he will continue to start for Newcastle over Harvey Barnes. That's sort of the lower price point, I would say. And the other options around that price point are obviously an Amad Diallo for United, and also Enzo Fernandez at Chelsea. For me, the considerations you have to have there are, for Enzo, do you already have Palmer and Jackson? If you do, I would recommend not tripling up on Chelsea. For example, in a week where they draw 0-0 with Everton, that's 3 blanks immediately in your team that you have. For Amad Diallo, for me, I just think Man United, just a little bit more hit and miss than a lot of the other teams at the moment. Whether he can continue his sort of hot streak prior to the Bournemouth match, I'm not sure. Whether Amorim continues to sort of rotate that front three, I can see that as a possibility. So for me, I just think he's not the pick that I'd be looking for. I would say Sarr and Murphy at that sort of price point definitely are my favoured options. If we move on to the slightly higher price point replacements for Bukayo Saka, and here I have James Maddison. Now, James Maddison is the, I think, 6th top scoring midfielder for FPL points, after Salah, Palmer, Saka, and Mbeumo at the moment. And he's been in fantastic form for Spurs. They've started to sort of pull him into that number 10 role, with Kulusevski playing on the right wing, Son playing on the left wing, and Maddison in that number 10 behind Solanke. That is Spurs' most creative lineup, and the way where they've looked at their most dangerous. Maddison obviously contributing so far with 8 goals and 4 assists so far this season. As you can see, he started 14 of the 17 games so far for Tottenham. So for me, like, his minutes are not as big as an issue as people are making out. I think the thing is that he comes off after, maybe like 60, 70 minutes, obviously 59 minutes this week against Liverpool. But I think that was more a sort of tactical change to deal with the problems they were having. But still managed to get his goal in those minutes. He's obviously on set pieces, corners, free kicks, creative hub for Tottenham, and obviously is able to get in positions and score their goals. 3rd highest scoring goal midfielder this season. And yeah, I think Spurs' fixtures do really start to pick up from game week 22, but over the next few weeks with Forest and Wolves, maybe you could look to get him in as a sort of Saka replacement over those 2 weeks, and then hope he can get something done for a very attacking Spurs team. Next up on this list, Phil Foden for Manchester City, who do have an excellent sort of fixture run over the next 5 weeks. He does have non-penalty expected goals of 0.22 and expected goals and assists of 0.53. As I was saying, very close to a Jacob Murphy. and this is a guy who potentially has a very high upside if Man City sort of click into gear with these great fixtures: Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford. Apart from Everton being very nice defence at the moment, after that there's some excellent fixtures from an offensive standpoint. Again, look, Everton are not a team that are top of the table, so there are potential to score against them. They have shown occasionally some defensive fragility, but over the last few game weeks have been good. For me, there is a high ceiling for Phil Foden. He could score a lot of points if Man City really sort of click into gear. However, there is obviously the price point at 9.1 million. Your funds are then less able to be spread elsewhere. The question, I guess, is: do you want to spread these Bukayo Saka funds, or are you willing to just sort of take a punt on who you think is going to be the best option for the next sort of 5-6 game weeks, not spread the funds around, and be able to come back into Bukayo Saka when he does become available again? I would say I think it's fine to go without him now. Arsenal's sort of nice fixture run, from an offensive standpoint, still carries on for the next sort of 3-4 weeks. And then after that is not as good as it has been. So when Saka does come back, it is possible to definitely be going without him. So if you are willing to go for somebody else and sort of spread his funds around, I think that's fine. Or if you do want to go maybe for a Phil Foden, for example, and sort of allow yourself almost that placeholder for Saka to come back in, that is definitely an option. I think that other people around this price point for me would be, maybe to talk about, would be Bruno Fernandes at Man United. And the same way I spoke about Ahmad, I just think Man United are not particularly a reliable option to be going for. They haven't quite worked out who's going to be playing in what position. I do think Amarin's now seen that Bruno's definitely more of a number 10 than like a deeper lying midfielder. So he's likely to be playing in that front three, obviously on penalties and set pieces for Man United. Can they create what they have been? I'm not sure. I would say Bruno is a slightly better option to me than Ahmad at this stage. I think he's obviously secure for pretty much 90 minutes every match, and to be starting in the team positionally where he will play, I'm expecting him to continue to start in that front three. So I think of the Manchester United assets, he's top for me. Outside of that, other options you can consider: Martinelli, likely to be playing on the wings now, maybe the right wing for Arsenal over the upcoming game weeks, at around 7-ish million. Diego Jota for Liverpool, I think, is probably not an option at the moment. I do think his minutes are going to be managed over this Christmas period. He hasn't started a game yet for Liverpool. I don't expect him to start again next week. I think he's not quite fully match fit. He has been coming off the bench for his cameos. Luis Diaz, another option for Liverpool. I think this one has probably a higher ceiling attached to it. I think Luis Diaz, obviously, you can sort of work out which games he's going to play, which games he's going to be benched. Obviously, that could switch and you could end up getting it wrong. But I do think sort of the games he does play, he does have a really high upside in this sort of very attacking Liverpool side. I would expect him to start again against Leicester after his performance this week. Against Spurs, and obviously Leicester being a team that we'd look to target from attacking fixtures, it could be a punt that's worth taking. For me, again, it's sort of the minutes and whether you can predict correctly which games he's going to play and not play is the issue. If you feel comfortable with that, he is somebody that you could perhaps punt on over the next few game weeks. He's obviously scored 7, 2 assists. Looks nice in that Liverpool team. I think those are really the key options for sort of an attacking point. I'm not very big on De Bruyne based off like minutes for him and for Man City. He's only got 2 goals and 2 assists, regardless of his sort of statistics here. Just can't see him being a great option with his lack of minutes. Son Heung-min, I just think there's better options at better price points for Spurs. Obviously, Maddison and Kulusevski are people that I would be much more keen on. as SAKA replacements. So yeah, for me, I actually think the cheaper price players look really nice. Jacob Murphy and Ismail Assar, I think good statistics, matching the statistics of a Maddison and a Foden between the two of them. Minutes for Sarr are very good. Minutes for Murphy are reasonable. Fixtures for Palace are excellent. Fixtures for Newcastle were reasonable. And then obviously the sort of goal and attacking threat maybe slightly less than a Maddison or a Foden. The potential for the big hauls might not be quite there. So if you are looking for sort of more explosive options, then for me, I think Maddison is a really nice pick. I think his minutes are a lot better than people are talking for Spurs. He's obviously started 14 of the 17 games for them. 8 goals, 4 assists so far. And then Foden, if you're looking to target those Man City fixtures, obviously has the upside of getting some potential big hauls. So I think that you've got Maddison and Foden as the replacements for me that have the biggest upsides. Sarr and Murphy that can help you continue to tick along at that medium price point. And then I've given you a few discussion points on some of the riskier or other options that are out there. Moving on to the front line, we obviously have the main man himself, Alexander Isak. I still think the fixtures look nice for Newcastle. He's obviously in great form with his hat-trick this week. He looks like a must-buy for me if you don't have him in your team. Followed by Nicholas Jackson at Chelsea. Missed a couple of chances this week, but obviously their chances are there for him. Chelsea have been looking fantastic going forwards. Have an excellent fixture run coming up. If you can get Nicholas Jackson in your team, he would definitely be somebody that I'd be looking to get in. After those two as sort of my main things, I have Gabby Jesus of Arsenal. He's not quite on this list at the moment just because of the minutes. He sort of doesn't fit into the spreadsheet that I keep manually. Just I don't have players that haven't played a certain number of minutes. But his expected goals and assists are 0.56. He slots in just around the Cunha level with expected goals of 0.44, which is quite nice for Arsenal. Obviously, I think these statistics are something that take with a bit of a pinch of salt, given his minutes have not quite been there for Arsenal. But I do expect after a hat-trick in midweek and 2 goals and assists for Arsenal against Palace, he will be starting again in that forward role against Ipswich, which is a big match. Ipswich, obviously a team that you can target from an offensive standpoint, have been conceding frequently quite a lot of goals. So Gabriel Jesus at the sort of 6.7, not 13.4, he is at a, I believe 6.7, might have risen. 6.8 million price point for Arsenal is a really nice sort of move that you can look to make. Potentially Cunha to Jesus, potentially Watkins to Jesus, Welbeck to Jesus, or even a João Pedro to Jesus. I do think are excellent options this week. I think he is a potential captaincy option, although I would say Salah is the number 1 option against Leicester. Perhaps if you are someone who doesn't have a Mo Salah or you're looking for a differential captain, Gabby Jesus could be a very nice option for Arsenal. And the next person I have on here is Chris Wood. Again, the price not being 11.1 million, he is at 6.6 million asset at the moment. But 0.33 expected goals and 0.4 expected goals and assists. 10 goals this season, the second top scoring striker alongside Alexander Isak. It's just been fantastic for Nottingham Forest. They do have some nice fixtures. Tottenham, there are goals in that game. Followed by Everton and Wolves, and then against Liverpool, a more difficult game. But those Forest fixtures do continue after that. Quite nice. I think Chris Wood is obviously the focal point of everything that Nottingham Forest are doing at the moment. Even at the end of their sort of fast counter-attacks, Chris Wood is arriving. He can score with his head, he can score with both feet. He's definitely a nice option in that sort of mid-price striker role. I think the guys I'd be looking at for me is Isak, Jackson, Wood and Jesus. If you can't reach up to those sort of price points, João Pedro is still okay. Johan Wissa is still okay. And maybe more of a differential pick again is a John Duran of Aston Villa. He looks like he's been taking the starting place away from Ollie Watkins at the moment. Duran is at 5.8 million, so could be a steal going forwards if he continues to start for Villa in the league. He's obviously already scored 7 goals this season, despite 3 starts only in the 17 games. But he looks like someone who could emerge as an interesting option. And then the final thing I just want to talk with you guys about is, given the sort of Bukayo Saka injury, is Erling Haaland over these next 5 weeks, is obviously the fixtures that we've talked about for Man City being the important fixtures for Man City, these big 5 fixture swing games for the team. Do you have the transfers? Do you have the money to move into Erling Haaland? I think that's a question that does need a little bit of consideration. Now with Saka out, how do you move into Haaland? With the context of my team, and I did have a look a little bit playing around with some wildcard drafts, etc. I almost feel like you would need to get rid of Saka and Palmer to be able to fund Haaland alongside an Isak. I do think that is a viable option at the moment. There really is an option to go into Haaland out of Palmer and Saka. However, what I would say is, because Salah has been in such great form and the Liverpool fixtures are just nice, like the next 3 games, Leicester, West Ham, Man United, I would say that I'm most likely to captain Salah in all 3 of those games. And if you're bringing Erling Haaland in at 14.9 million in that forward role, really you're going to be bringing him in as someone that you'd like to captain. And if he is unable to come in as a captain, I just think that price point, the money can just be better spent elsewhere. You could easily bring in a Nicholas Jackson. If you're going to remove Palmer, you can remove him. You can bring in a Phil Foden. You can bring in some other higher priced midfielders, some more expensive defenders. You can get sort of Isak, Jackson, and maybe a Cunha or a Chris Wood or a Dominic Solanke up front all together, and use that money better off. But look, it is definitely a different option to a lot of the ways people's teams are. And if you are looking to go a little bit different, I think this game week is really the time where people are going to start to differentiate from each other, and worth sort of taking a punt on someone that you think is an option. Personally, I don't think it's Erling Haaland, but I do think this game week is definitely a chance for people to improve rank. So have a look through what I've done. Check out this video, check out my previous video on transfer plans. Have a think about who you want to go for. Post in the comments if you've got any thoughts, and I will be doing a deadline stream. If you post your team IDs in there, I'll do a review of your teams for you, and we will talk through what transfer plans you can potentially make and how to help you guys out going forwards. If you've really enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like. I obviously really appreciate it. Small channel trying to grow, all the subscribers really help, and it's an easy way to keep checking out my content consistently. I will be continuing to do videos on a regular basis, and I will be in for a deadline stream this Thursday, so please join. I will be answering all comments in the chat, so that's the bonus of being a small content creator. I have time to answer all your questions and do some team reviews. So hope you guys have a great week. Think long and hard about your transfers this week. It will be important. And yeah, hope everyone has a great Christmas and a good New Year. Merry Christmas. And give me a subscribe as a nice Christmas present. Thanks guys. Have a great week. Catch you later.